Thank you for joining us on our QTV Business and Economy program. The Business and Economy program is intended to promote the ideals of a corporate Gambia identity with the objective of forging partnerships through dialogue between the public and the private sector, civil society organizations, and the international community. In today's episode, we shall be talking about the Gambia Bureau of Statistics and the role and responsibility that institution plays within our economy. As a country, the question is, are we ascribing the importance of statistics as is required, especially from the perspective of our economic development aspirations? Do we pay attention to the tons of report that GBoS churns out year in, year out? The policies that we promulgate at the level of central government, cabinet in particular, do they make reference to the reports that are churned out by the Gambia Bureau of Statistics? Our macroeconomic variables of inflation, or referred to as CPI, other variables of interest, unemployment rate, and the various claims being made by various institutions in terms of their contribution to GDP. Are these fact-based or are they opinions made by the respective leaders? These are some of the questions that we will be looking at and discussing today on this program. To help us in our discussions, we have invited two distinguished personalities and gentlemen, both employees and workers, senior management people at the GBoS. We have invited Samba Barrow, who is a principal statistician at GBoS and has been with that institution for over 10 years. And he is responsible for overseeing of the national accounts of this country, and he is within the Economic Statistics Directorate. We have also invited Ibrahim Suso, who is a statistician and is also within the Economic Statistics Directorate, and he covers everything ranging from surveys and undertaking the various macroeconomic studies of the various economic parameters that we track within this country. And he has also been with GBoS for over 5 years. Gentlemen, a warm welcome to the both of you to the Business and Economy program.
Thank you.
Let me begin by asking you, not much in detail, but just a broad overview in terms of the mandate of the Gambia Bureau of Statistics. I would want to know the key departments within the Bureau, and also how are you governed? Is there a board of directors at the GBoS? And also, what are some of the key economic parameters that you track?
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Roberts. The key mandate of the Gambia Bureau of Statistics is to provide statistical information to government, to development partners, researchers, and the general public. It is also mandated upon GBoS to coordinate the national statistical system of the country, which is coordinating the statistical activities and statistical production of MDAs, that's the ministries, departments, and agencies. Key among some of the activities that we are mandated to do is the conduct of the population and housing census, which is conducted every 10 years. The last one was conducted in 2013. And also the economic census, which was also conducted in 2014. We also conduct national household surveys, which includes the integrated household survey, which is conducted every 5 years. and multiple indicator cluster survey, the malaria indicator survey, amongst list of household surveys that we conduct in this country. Coming back to our structure, GBoS operates in two different sectors. The Economic Division Directorate and the Social Statistics Directorate. The Economic Statistics Directorate comprises of the National Accounts Unit, which is responsible for compiling the gross domestic product and other macroeconomic indicators of the country. The directorate also includes Consumer Price Unit, which is responsible for compiling inflation of this country. It also comprises of merchandise trade statistics, which is the import and exports of goods and services in the country. Tourism statistics is also part of it. Labor statistics part of it. Those are the main units under the Economic Statistics Directorate. Coming to the Social Statistics Directorate, the core of this directorate is the Demographic Unit, which is responsible for the population and housing censuses. We also have a unit called the Housing and Surveys Unit, which is purely mandated for taking care of surveys in the country. Those are the main units that oversee the functions of GBoS, which is the Gambia Bureau of Statistics.
And as long as governance is concerned, you have a board of directors?
We have got what we call the National Statistical Council or Statistics Council. Okay. Their role is very similar to the role of board of directors. They are the governing body of the Gambia Bureau of Statistics, and it comprises of a chairman, deputy chairman, our statistician general, and other key partners from other institutions that are also members to this council.
Okay. Let me come to Mr. Suso. I know you operate more from the technical. You are the people that punch the numbers and compile the statistics and do the analysis and all those niceties, if you will. But you seem to have developed a number of networks across Africa. You have some standing arrangements of collaboration with the Ghana Statistical Service, Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, Uganda Bureau of Statistics, Liberia Bureau of Statistics, and Statistics Sierra Leone. What are the reasons for you having established these partnerships with these institutions?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Roberts, and thank you for having me in this program. This is a program that I don't actually miss. It's a program that I definitely love to watch because it gives me an insight of what other people are doing in other institutions, and I think it's an initiative that is welcomed. Going to the question, statistical offices don't work in isolation. That is the reason why you have groups at the regional level, be it at the ECOWAS level and at the AU level, because you need to be doing some knowledge sharing, because you don't work in isolation. Sometimes there are others who have a comparative advantage in terms of doing particular studies, so you might want to learn from how they are operating. So from time to time we collaborate, and sometimes we meet in regional workshops where we also share knowledge, and sometimes we visit some of these institutions and then do some knowledge sharing. often we do that. Not long ago, we had to go to Rwanda to also learn how they compile data on agricultural statistics, because we felt they were doing it in a way in which they were using some technology that makes it very efficient in terms of collecting data and accuracy as well. So that's the reason why we had collaboration with several other statistics officers.
Let me take that question a step further. And here I want to look at in-country, because if you have created this relationship or this partnership, if you will, in terms of knowledge sharing and sharing of best practices across countries, within the country, do you have such partnership initiatives? I could think of, is there a collaboration between the University of the Gambia and the Gambia Bureau of Statistics, for example, amongst other institutions as well? Could you shed light on those as well? Yes,
of course. At the moment, we have collaboration with the Gambia Revenue Authority, because those working on national accounts, there is no way they can compile data on quarterly GDP without having to collaborate with GRA, because they need data from GRA in terms of their VAT data. So there's no way they can work in isolation. So for that reason, we've signed an MOU between GBoS and GRA in terms of sharing of information to some extent. And also, we've gone very far in terms of working on an MOU between the Gambia Bureau of Statistics and the University of the Gambia. We are at the stage where we are about to sign the Memorandum of Understanding, so that when we are doing researches, we can do it in collaboration with the University of the Gambia, it being the highest institution of learning in the country. We've gone very far in terms of signing an MOU between the GBoS and University of the Gambia. And third on that list is the Central Bank, because they need data from us, as well as GBoS also needs data from Central Bank, because they can't compile their data on balance of payments without having to consult GBoS for the trading goods, because they do the estimation of trading services and we do trade in goods. So they would have to need our data in order to compile their BOP. The national accounts cannot also compile their data without having to use data from the central bank. So this is how much we've been collaborating between GBoS and the central bank in terms of some of these macroeconomic indicators. And the inflation rates as well that they publish on their websites is often taken from the Gambia Bureau of Statistics based on our consumer price index.
Now, let me still take that question still further, and I appreciate the overview that you have given for people to better understand in terms of how data generation and compilation, mandate works, and how institutions have to work together to help in compiling these statistics. But your intervention pretty much outlined the government institutions that you work with, and for obvious reasons. But from the perspective of the private sector, are there much of an engagement between you and private sector players? Whoever the private sector player is, or whatever private sector player comes into mind. Do you have such arrangements as well, whether it's by way of an MOU, whether it's by way of engagement to undertake research, because that in itself also would help, for people to make use of the services that you provide?
Okay, for the private sector, mostly what tends to happen is they send in data requests from the Gambia Bureau of Statistics, but I mean, I've not experienced at any time, and I'm not aware of any private sector institution that we've been working with before. All I know is that they come to GBoS and request for data. But then we also sometimes, because there are some economic indicators that we cannot compile without their collaboration, and I think, they've been doing very well in terms of response rate when we are doing economic surveys. Because when we go to them with cover letters, most of the times, they give us all the information that is required to compile economic statistics. So that is how well we've collaborated with them, but then not in terms of having to collect data in collaboration with them. All we do is they come to our offices and place requests in terms of different economic data, mostly on trade and GDP and CPI most of the times. That is what they're interested in.
Mr. Barrow, let me come to you. I know that some time back the GBoS was part and parcel of the central bank. I want to believe that that arrangement is no longer in place, and you're now separate entities. Even though I appreciate the fact that you two work together, you still work together in a way. Since the hyphing off, if I may use that term loosely, of GBoS from the central bank, what has the experience been? Has that helped the GBoS in terms of its independence and also been able to focus more in terms of its mandate, or has it led to some challenges?
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Roberts. But it has never been, to my knowledge, where GBoS has been part and parcel of the central bank. I think what happened to us, GBoS at some point didn't have its own premises, and we were housed at the central bank. So there was that arrangement between the government and central bank. So we were occupying the 5th floor of the central bank. But we were operating independently. You know, it has always been, you know, independent in its operation and has no, you know, influence coming from central bank. This was back in, you know, before 2005, when GBoS, you know, central bank felt that they need their space. So GBoS then had to, you know, move to somewhere in Jimpex, you know, and down the lines we were able to negotiate for funds through the World Bank, and they helped us to have our own structure, which is now situated at Canifin Institutional Layout. So that's where we are, Mr. Robert, on that. I just want to quickly add on to the previous discussions you just shared with my colleague regarding, you know, the participation of government and private sector, as he rightly mentioned. But I also want to inform you and the public that GBoS also, in partnership with its stakeholders, the main stakeholders, developed what we call the National Strategy for the Development of Statistics. This is looking at the statistical systems and the statistical operations in terms of data product or quality data production. And this has been finalized and now incorporated in our National Development Plan to help inform, you know, policy and decision makers with statistics. So that's something I just wanted to add on to what you just spoke about earlier.
Thanks for sharing that. When we started, I put a general view out there that and asked, you know, a probing question in terms of whether we as a country appreciate and value and make use of statistics. The statistics that you generate, the surveys that you undertake, and the intelligence that ultimately emanates from those compilations and computations. Let me get your perspective. You've been with the GBoS for some time, and I know that the ultimate desire of any institution is for the institution to feel that the services for which it was created, pretty much its mandate, that, you know, the public views that institution as being indispensable and, you know, of great value, you know, in terms of what you do. What is your view and what is your take on that? Do you think that, I mean, as a country, we appreciate and make use of statistics in the manner in which perhaps the GBoS would have loved us to do? And if not, what do you think it is that we can do to begin to change that tendency, if you will?
Okay, thank you. Yes, I think the relevance of GBoS is highly recognized by our government. And there are many reasons to attest to that. One of the reasons would be government realizing our importance and our needs in terms of capacity development or capacity building, our needs for conducting household surveys and activities, censuses. All these activities are hugely resource intensive. They require a lot of money in order to do these activities. And government have been very much supportive in that aspect. Looking at the 2013 population and housing census, it was mainly the enumeration part of it was sponsored by government, was financed by government. And also our development partners. They have been key players, you know, in the activities that we undertake at GBoS. You know, they have been supporting in terms of resources and also facilitating capacity building activities or initiatives that are proposed to them by the Bureau. So looking at it from that perspective, yes, I think without their acknowledgement or recognition of what we do, their cooperation or support would be really minimal. But we've seen an increase in trend in terms of their support to what we do. That notwithstanding, there are still challenges, especially when it comes to the side of the general public. People sometimes don't know what GBoS actually do. You know, many people will think all we do is we just count people and houses in the country, full stop. That's what they think, that's what we do entirely in GBoS. But that is an activity that takes place only every other 10 years. So we do more to that, but that is also simply because people are not well informed, people are not well sensitized as to what we do, and thus, you know, their level of understanding and knowledge on what we do is limited. You know, so we are also doing everything possible to enhance advocacy for what we do, because statistics really, it's a yardstick that measures, you know, whatever activity we are in today compared to what that activity would be tomorrow. So given the relevance of that, I think people should be more sensitized and well informed about what we do.
I hear the point that you're making in terms of government providing the requisite support to GBoS for GBoS to carry out its mandate, especially when it comes to issues of population enumeration along other aspects of the economy as well. But the point I'm driving at here is not government created GBoS, so government is obligated to support GBoS for GBoS to effectively carry out its mandate. As government has created any other institution in this country, it is government's responsibility to fund that institution, especially public enterprises. Yes, the public enterprise could, you know, be creative and try to create its own sources of funding. And I think, you know, as a country, we need to be paying attention to this going forward, given the fact that government cannot, you know, realistically, effectively, and adequately fund every public institution that it creates. But the point I'm driving at is this. The point, and this is the question that I'm asking, and I mean, I just want to provide clarification as long as this is concerned. I mean, you undertake all these studies, you put all this data and intelligence out there. Is government using that intelligence and that data? Is the public sector, is the private sector, are private businesses using that information? Are institutions, government or otherwise, using that information? And the reason why I'm asking this is, I've been in the civil service, I've worked in the private sector, but I could count the number of times that somebody has written something and quoted the GBoS. Even government, when government, you know, promulgates policy, are they going back to the very responsibilities that they have endowed you with and the reports that you have created, and that you would see that in their policy they would say such policy was created because it is addressing this thing that has been revealed by GBoS? That is my question. Okay.
Thank you very much. That's very clear and precise, Mr. Robert. Yes, government does.
Okay. Can you give me examples?
The key example to that would be the results of the integrated household survey, the poverty indicators there. It's one of the reasons that's why the finalization of the NDP was delayed, because government needed those numbers to ascertain what the poverty levels are, so that they can take the necessary interventions to address those situations. So the NDP was actually delayed by a year because the household integrated survey is a one-year exercise. So up until the end of that exercise and the results finalized, that was when the NDP was also, you know, finalized with those numbers. And now it's what we have as the national blueprint of the country. That's one example. So it's definitely been used for their interventions. The other one would be, for your information, we have just rebased our gross domestic product benchmark year or base year from 2004 to 2013, right? So given that, government also now is using our new rebase figures because going by the old rebase numbers, for example, our debt to GDP ratio was close to 130%. But with the new rebase figures, our debt to GDP ratio has now gone down to less than 100%, right? So these are numbers that government is now using for advocacy and interventions for their relevant activities and programs.
Okay. Interesting point. I did not know that a rebasing has been done vis-a-vis GDP, but I mean, perhaps, you know, I would come to your office to, you know, request for the information on that. It's interesting that the rebasing has resulted in the gross domestic product as a ratio of GDP, I mean, the debt levels as a ratio of GDP going down from 130% to, under 100%. You are a statistician, and you know, I'm sure you know what where I'm driving at. But you mentioned the integrated household survey, and the reason why I asked this question, and here I would quote something which was published in 2017. And Mr. Suso, you can jump in as well because he has been talking, a lot. But there was a press release from your office, and here I would quote ad verbatim: "The implementation of the Integrated Household Survey Series is critical in informing policymakers, in particular by identifying the poor, their location, and their socio-demographic characteristics. Such information is critical in designing policy reforms and programs to boost poverty reduction." I know you just made the point that the results of the Integrated Household Survey was critical to informing the National Development Plan blueprint. And it also delayed the launching of that blueprint because it was waiting on the provision of that information. Providing a statistics to government in terms of the realities that obtain, and government onboarding those statistics within the policy, you know, that they promulgate, are two different things. And this is where my question was leading to. But I'll take your answer, you know, as it were. If we look at poverty in this country, and as per the Integrated Household Survey as well, it has gone to say that as long as the Greater Banjul area is concerned, poverty has actually improved. Yeah, and that poverty within the rural setting is where the challenge is. And the rural people who live within the rural areas account for about 64% of the overall poverty within the country. I look at the Greater Banjul area. I mean, you walk into areas like Bundung, you walk into areas like Churchillstown, you walk into areas like Old Joshuang, New Joshuang, Bakau, Folong Kono, you know, and even the quarry within Larikunda, you know, and you wonder, and we know of the rural-urban drift and the number of squatters that are out there, and then your institution says that poverty is improving in this country, especially amidst CPI that we've been seeing in this country, cost of goods. One would begin to doubt if what you are telling us is the reality.
Okay, okay. I'll first and foremost start with poverty. I think most people don't understand how poverty is actually measured.
Okay, on the $2 a day, is that
less than $1.25 a day? But
okay.
Usually this is measured on household consumption, not based on actually what type of houses people are living in or what sort of life they are living. Probably what we do is to ask them how much they spend on a daily basis on several items that are on the CPI basket. But with regards to the relationship between CPI and poverty, I think I'll let Mr. Barrow shed more light on that, because he has more experience working with CPI than I do.
Okay.
Mr. Barrow?
Yeah, I think just to complement what he said, I mean, poverty is quite relative, right? And when we say that the urban poverty has improved and the rural poverty gone up, it doesn't mean that poverty is still not there. There's still 48.6% poverty rate in this country, which is huge. That's almost half of the population. So we are not underestimating that. What we are doing is we are just comparing what it was before and what it is now. Right? So we are saying before it was a 48.1% and now it's a 48.6%. So there is that increase of 0.5% increment.
150,000 in terms of actual numbers of people
and
who
that
have
is a
gone
lot.
into the poverty.
And that is a lot. Yeah. 5% is just the rate. 0.5% is just the rate, which might look small, significant, but in actual numbers, 150,000 is a lot. Yeah. But what we are saying here is, even for people, if it is even for people, I think it should be a cause of concern for everybody, talk less of 150,000 people. But what we are saying here is, looking at the analysis, comparing the two, previously and now, you know, you find out that, say, the rural poverty has increased. And we all know that the rural area, their main economic activity or the main dependent activity is agriculture. And agricultural production over the years have been doing very bad. And this is what people rely on, not even for commercial purposes, but for consumption. Yeah? And the production levels has gone down drastically. And that is one of the factors, one of the reasons that you see an increase in poverty in those areas. Now, coming to the rural setting, as you said, yes, there are so many things out there that you can obviously see that are some of the things that we think it's a sign of poverty. And yes, they are. But then it doesn't also mean that there has not been any improvement. Because, quite frankly, there have been a lot of economic activities that has also come into the country compared to what it was before.
Like what?
There are a lot of formal and informal activities, you know, in the urban area compared to the rural. Yeah, all these financial sector, new banks coming into our economy. You know, you've got the
new banks, as in, I mean, since the incoming of the borough administration?
No, generally, because we are basing our discussion here based
within the 10-year.
Yeah, based on our period of analysis, statistical analysis, and this is back from the previous government to now. You know, so you can see an increase in terms of some of the sectors when it comes to employment, for instance. There have been a lot of banks coming into the country compared to what it was before, and this employs people.
Now, when you say
the communication sector, for example.
When you say compared to what was here before, I mean,
what we are comparing here.
You are a statistician.
Yeah.
So, you know, numbers, they don't lie.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, so when you say before, then you are drawing a parallel, you are comparing something. So, I mean, if we're talking in the general sense, let's just talk, I mean, in the general sense. Because if you say compared to before, what is before?
This is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Look, we are talking about integrated household survey here.
Yeah.
This is one that indicates these poverty levels. There was there was in 2010 an integrated household survey was conducted, That is the one we are comparing with our latest integrated household survey, which is just completed in 2015, 2016.
Yes.
Right?
Okay.
So this is what we are comparing now.
See, that's good, because that provides me with clarification in terms of when you say compared to before.
This is what I mean.
Okay,
so we are talking about
great.
2010, 2015 integrated household surveys.
Good, great.
So during this period, there has been this improvement in terms of economic activities, as I just mentioned, in the financial sector, employing more people, the communication sector. Also, we've seen, you know, in 2010, I'm not sure what sectors were here, but we can see an increase in those areas. And even the informal sector, all these businesses are happening around, mainly around the urban area than the rural area. And people get employed in these areas. And because of that, you know, it also, you know, improve their income. And by virtue of which also poverty also declines. But that doesn't mean that the poverty is not there. 48.1% of our population living under $1.5 a day.
It's still high.
It's still too extremely high.
Okay. Now let us begin to look into specifics, and here I would come to you. I know the last time you tried to push me to him, you know, in terms of his areas of expertise, which is fine. But I want us to look at the CPI, as it were, the Consumer Price Index, or generally what we would refer to as inflation. You know, the layman, so that the layman can understand. And here I want to make reference to slide 1. In terms of the CPI basket, when I looked at it, the food and non-alcoholic beverages accounted for 54.72% of the CPI basket, and for obvious reasons. No questions in terms of why that is the case. But it is what caught my eye was the weight. And here I would want to get your views in terms of the weight, and the weights by relevance. Yes. I wanted to understand, why is it that in the CPI basket or the inflation basket, more weight is assigned to meat, for example, than to fish? And the reason why I'm asking this, and we can look at other items, but because of lack of time, we cannot get into those details. Because to me, more Gambians consume fish as a result of affordability than they would meat. Not to say they don't consume meat, but not as often as, you know, they would consume fish. I love fish. I'm not a meat person. So but what's the reason behind the CPI basket more weight being given to meat than to fish? Okay. And I think that would also help to educate.
Absolutely, absolutely right. First and foremost, I want to inform you that these numbers we are quoting here is based on, you know, our CPI base year of 2004. Which is really, you're looking at it from 2004 to now, is about 14 years we've moved on. So you'll find out that our consumption patterns have changed, right? And most of those things
are there
now,
newer figures than these?
Yes, we have just completed the integrated household survey, which gives us the items that are consumed, and the weights are also constructed from there. So we have got preliminary figures on this, which we will be validating soon, and you will see a complete change in the structure of our CPI basket. Right. Coming back to the 2004, yes.
The rebasing was done in 2004.
Yes, it was.
Yes.
But the new one is 2013.
The new basing is 2013.
No, 2015, 16.
2015, 2016.
Yeah.
Okay, then that has not been published.
Not yet. As I said, we have just got.
Okay, yeah. So we speak on what has been published.
What has been published.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes,
right.
because that is where all the CPI data up to now are based.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So if I ask you what is the inflation rate in the Gambia right now, and you tell me 9.7%, that 9.7% is based on the rebasing of 2004.
Absolutely right.
Yeah. Exactly.
Absolutely right. Yeah. Currently, it's at 6.7. That's the latest inflation rate for the previous month. Yeah. Coming back to your question, yes, meat having more weight than fish. I think it depends on the way we look at it, right? And yes, one could easily say that there is more fish consumption than meat. But if you look at it, the amount that we spend on the fish and what type of fish do we eat, we are talking about here. How much of this fish can the local ordinary, or the type of fish can the local ordinary person afford to buy? Because it's all about the money, right? It's not about the quantity, and it's about the type of fish that you eat. The bunga fish could cost far less than, you know, the other types of fish. And if you look at the consumption pattern of our population, majority of the people, will be consuming, you know, less costly fish because of their availability. I think that could be one reason. The other reason could be that meat also is not just meat coming from cattle, sheep, or goat, but it includes the consumption of chicken. And you can see chicken also is highly consumed in here. And these numbers are obtained from the households directly. So whatever we publish here, we go to the household, sit with them, and compile these numbers. And obviously, one may think, but that obviously fish has got more weight than meat, just by observation. But subjectively, right? The fact is what the numbers are saying. But based on the current CPI, which we are about to publish, it's completely different. Here we have seen fish, you know, having more weight than meat. That is the case in the new one.
And I will tell you the reason why I asked the question. For me, inflation or consumer price index supposed to reflect, the bigger of the parameter, the parameter that has the widest spread or impact within the economy is what you need to look at. I can sit here, I've not done any survey to back this thing up, but I can say in Gambia, generally, I want to believe that from an affordability perspective, more households would likely eat meals that are made from fish than meals that are made from meat. And I'm just thinking of the economy in terms of per capita GDP, affordability. You understand? So if you're measuring inflation, one would think then that a greater weight should be ascribed to fish, because when the price changes, when the price of that fish changes, the CPI would reflect a more realistic, you know, than, I mean, if, say, for example, 25% of Gambians consume meat every day, and you have 75% consuming fish every day, then the CPI could be skewed, because then you're ascribing more weight to 25% than you could at 75%. I don't know what the reasoning might have been for, the rebasing in 2015, 2016. But this is the reason why I'm asking the question, just to understand, just to understand your work and how it is done. But let me also come to Suso. The same question, but perhaps here, looking at it in terms of the other bits that don't have that much, of weight. Because when you talk of inflation, you've captured most of the parameters within the basket, the CPI basket, have impact on welfare. And we all agree that one of the things that could change people's welfare in terms of improving it is education. And this is the reason why we all push our kids to go to school and push them, to go and have their degrees, because, their social status and their welfare improves. And I'm sure all three of us are living testimonies of these things. And we would equally push our kids to do the same, so that, their welfare would even be better than our welfare. But if I look at the CPI, basket, in terms of education, again, the weight to it
is too low.
It's low. Why is that? I'm just trying to understand. Is it because of the affordability now?
I can see where you're coming from.
Yes.
Mr. Roberts, if you look at the ratio of public schools as opposed to private schools, we have more public schools in the Gambia than we have private schools.
True.
And most of the private schools are concentrated around the urban areas. And the CPI basket covers the entire country.
Yes.
And looking at how much some of these public schools are charging, it's almost next to nothing. So for that reason, the cost of education is not too expensive.
Okay.
So that would be the same case for health.
Okay.
Most of our people, if you go to though one might say they may not be given all the drugs that they would need, but looking at the service that is offered at the public hospitals, it's almost next to nothing. It's the peanuts.
Okay. Excellent explanation. I can buy into that. You know, but you know, maybe I could say, well, let's look at the health one. You know, but education, I totally. I mean, I can see where you're coming from. Now, the other bit I want to talk about is the unemployment rate. You hear different rates being put out there within the country. Some people would tell you the unemployment rate is around 40%. Some would tell you, are you kidding me? It's higher than that. It's around 70%. You know, from your reckoning, why do you believe that different people hold different views in terms of what the unemployment rate is? Why is it that some people say 40? I've had people on this show who have quoted 40. And I've had people outside, you know, I mean, I usually would quote 40 as well, but somebody has told me, you're kidding me, it's around 70%. So why do you think there are different viewpoints in terms of where the unemployment rate is? I know you always have to go with the official figure, but they must be casting doubt in terms of that official figure. And that is what I'm trying to understand. Why do you think that is? And how can we help to change some of these doubts and, you know, I mean, as we go on?
Okay. What I know for certain is that the only institution that is mandated to collect data on measuring employment or unemployment in the Gambia is the Gambia Bureau of Statistics. And we base most of the things that we do on how it has been, or how ILO recognizes the way to measure unemployment. Most people may think unemployment would be based on only those people who are not currently working, but there are conditions attached to it. The first and foremost would be the age bracket, which is from 15 to 64. So all those who are going to be considered as unemployed, they have to be within this age bracket. And secondly, they have to be people who are actually looking for work, and they are also available for work. So I think most people would misconstrue this concept to only those people that they might find in the street not having jobs, or their relatives at home who are not working. Probably most of those guys are not looking for work, so you don't consider them as part of those who are unemployed, because those people are not looking for work. So if they are not looking for work, you don't consider them as unemployed. So I think this is the misconception that most people have. But I don't know, I'm not sure where they quote these figures from, but unemployment of 40% would be a disaster for any country.
Now, how do you ascertain, or how do you come to the conclusion in terms of trying to come to establishing the unemployment rate, in terms of whether they are looking for a job or they are not looking for a job? Is this through the respective surveys, like the household census survey that you did, which is done every 10 years?
Yes.
You know, I mean, or is there a periodic, because, I mean, when you talk of economic parameters like inflation, like unemployment rate, you know, these are things that, you know, businesses and government want to even know month on month how we're doing.
Okay.
So if you undertake a census, say for example in 2013, you know, which is the last census that we did, that you undertook rather, and then we are now in 2018. Yes, in 2010, that information would have been relevant because it is based somewhere in terms of the feedback that you get from people. But do you do updates of those you know, every 10-year surveys, and how do you do it so that we can better understand, you know, for the public to better understand how is it that you could tell us unemployment as per the 2013 census that we did was this percentage, but in 2018 it is still this, and it is this, and these are the reasons why it is this.
Okay. Okay, the most recent figures can be cited from the census. But going back to the first question that you asked, I believe what you were asking was how do we actually measure unemployment, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Basically, there is no specific question that asks whether they are employed or unemployed. Okay. What we do is we ask them a series of questions. Okay. So from those series of questions now is where you actually derive whether or not they are employed or unemployed. Okay. Because there are a set of questions that you have been asked. There are two definitions for unemployment. We have the strict definition and we have the relaxed definition. The strict definition trying to look at whether you've been employed in the past 30 days, or the past 7 days, which is the strict definition. So these are what we use. But currently, the good news would be we currently concluded the data collection for the labor force. I think it's the second one that has been conducted. The first one was done in 2012, but because of lack of funding, we couldn't do one after 5 years. So we only were able to secure funding this year. And then we did a labor force survey, which, I mean, hopefully before the end of the year, probably the figures will be out. So I believe from now moving forward, probably that would be a figure that would be very reliable, that people can actually reference whenever they actually want to talk about unemployment.
Okay. Mr. Barrow, I had a forum with, I think about 2 weeks ago, and we were discussing the youths in this country and how the demographic, as per the 2013 census, places, I mean, where we've seen that the composition of the youths in this country has been increasing over time. And one of the youths that are invited in this forum, you know, talking about the economic opportunities that exist in country for the youths, one of them highlighted the challenges in terms of the number of youths who are actually, because of the high fertility rate and because of the early marriage, you know, lose opportunities, you know, that ordinarily they would have come by had those challenges not, you know, being realized. But, and we discussed the high dependency ratio in the economy. I think your institution, and correct me if I'm wrong, says that the dependency ratio is quite high. Actually, for every one person that is working, you have about, what, 8 people that depend on you. Could that be one of the things that people are looking at and saying, well, if the dependency ratio is so high, then you know, one can only depend on someone if that person cannot provide for him or herself. So is that something that maybe people are looking at and using that to gauge perhaps where the unemployment rate is?
I'm not sure. I cannot talk for them because I don't know where they're actually quoting these figures from. But you know, for
but what is the dependency rate that you have from the 2013
population census? I don't have that by heart, but it's something very close to 10. But I definitely don't have it by heart. But I know that every individual, I mean, actually has almost about 8 to 10 people dependent on them. Okay. And these things are manifested in our households. I mean, yeah. In most of our households, only 1 or 2 individuals are responsible for the rest. The rest are either actually currently studying or they are virtually not doing anything. But if you want to look at it from that perspective, you will make a mistake of having to...
I'm not looking at it from that perspective. Yeah. We're discussing, and I'm trying to understand, and I'm giving you an opportunity to explain to the viewers in terms of, because I take it that the official statistics, I take the official statistics. If you ask me what is the unemployment rate in the Gambia, I'll tell you 40%, because that is what GBoS has told me. Yeah? But I'm saying that there are some people out there who say that no, it is way higher than that.
Yeah, I think
so that is what I'm trying to understand. I mean, is it possible that they are looking at the high dependency ratio and confusing the dependency ratio with the unemployment rate?
Possibly right.
Forgetting that perhaps the people who are dependent, some of them are still schooling. Yeah. You know, this is, I mean, this is what I'm trying to understand.
And not part of the active population.
Yes.
Exactly, this is what I was going to say. I mean, they're looking at it from that perspective, but I don't think it's quite appropriate to look at it from that perspective. Because in our households, we got people who are not in the age bracket for employment. You know, you got the elderly, you got the children who are not in that age bracket of 15 to 64, and they are all part of our dependents. So if you should negate those ones out of our households, definitely, then, you know, we would, their quotation would not be appropriate.
Yeah, and so to add to that, even those who are within the age bracket, those who are currently going to school, because they're obviously not looking for work. So if you are doing the competition for unemployment, those who are currently students not going to school, they are not part of those who we count as
they might be looking at
part of the unemployment.
The wrong thing.
But now that brings me to my next point, which is because when you publish the unemployment rate, you just publish one figure, yeah, and say the unemployment rate is 40%. I mean, is it time that maybe perhaps we look at disaggregating the unemployment rate into what is cyclical, what is structural? I mean, is that something that we need to have perhaps, and maybe that would help people to better appreciate, you know, these things, or even frictional, I mean, unemployment, because I could decide to leave a job today because I'm about to start a job in 2 weeks' time somewhere else. But I mean, if you're computing your statistics and you ask me and I say, well, no, I'm out of a job now, I'm not telling you that I'll be starting a job in a week. And we have a lot of this in this economy, especially if you take at the tourism sector, for example. Yeah, where the tourism sector operates for 6 months, 7 months out of the year, and for the next, you know, months, those people are out of a job. If you go to them at that time, they'll say, I'm out of a job. But come 5 months' time, they'll be in a job. So is it time that perhaps we begin to disaggregate our unemployment so that it reflects who is structurally unemployed, who is frictionally unemployed, and who is cyclically, unemployed? And maybe that would help us.
I think you're right. Definitely, I think that's the way to go, to be honest. But some of the things are not have been there. You know, seasonality have been factored in. But then, as you said, it's about time also for us to improve on what we do. But you find out that the challenge we have, as you mentioned earlier, it's resources, funding. Conducting these activities nationwide requires a lot of money in terms of, you know, human capacity, material, you know, all these enumerators we employ, vehicle, fuel, and you name them. It's really expensive. So ideally, we will want to conduct this exercise every 2 or 3 years, so that the numbers could be regularly updated. You know, but he said, just mentioned here that the last one was in 2012 before we get this one done this year. And prior to 2012, I couldn't even remember when the previous labor force survey was done. You know, so it all comes back to funding now. Even if we are able to disaggregate the information as you requested, if we cannot regularly conduct that, at some point it will become absolute. So that is something that we are also, you know.
Just to add to that, I think you were asking a question about disaggregating unemployment by the different other demographic characteristics, probably by disaggregated by gender, or by doing it by residence, which is by urban, rural, and the different age categories. Probably we may be able to do it because what tends to happen is, in every household that we go to, when we ask for individuals who are in the household, we ask for their ages, which we will also be able to break it down in terms of the different age groups. And we'll also be able to break it down to the level of the local government areas, so that it tells you from each local government area what is the rate of unemployment. You know, and also by residents, urban, rural, and also by male, female. All these things we'll be able to do, because the data is almost ready and we are doing the cleaning. So when we are doing the data analysis, because we have an expert in-house, we have someone who has studied labor at the level of masters. I believe he should be able to impart a lot of quality into what we are currently doing in terms of computing data on labor statistics.
Viewers, thank you very much. This was all we had for you today. We have heard from the 2 gentlemen from the Gambia Bureau of Statistics. As I have said at the starting of the program, as a country, we cannot develop without paying attention to the reports that they generate. It is incumbent in us as a country, as a people, to begin to look at these statistics, because these statistics will provide us with the requisite guideline to help us plan and promulgate policies and even measure our economic development aspirations, be it the unemployment rate, be it the CPI, be it even GDP and how we're growing. These things are imperatives. But most importantly, we know that funding is a challenge, and we know that we are under the new Gambia dispensation, and we hope that the requisite funding needed by the GBoS would be provided so that they could provide us with more up-to-date statistics, which statistics we could in turn use to inform our various business decisions, be it at the level of the private sector, be it at the level of the government or the public institutions as well. On that note, thank you. Mr. Barrow, thank you very much for coming on the program. It was a pleasure having you on this program. Mr. Suso, thank you very much. Thank you for enlightening us in terms of GBoS, what you do, and for sharing your experiences.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
So and in the long run, you would have these programs in the local languages too.